before we finish, to really galvanize a call for action. Almost could do it sort of one by one at this stage, couldn't we? Maybe we should all move forward so we can make it a really intimate moment. She's going to galvanize a call for action and spotlight the opportunities for more diverse and inclusive investment across the industry, as well as take a broad look at the challenges and reasons for optimism. Please welcome back Lou Smith in conversation with Eric Collins, who's CEO and founding member of Impact X Capital Partners, the double bottom line venture capital company founded to support underrepresented entrepreneurs across Europe. Here they come. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I think it's the first time I've ever walked onto Lizzo.
Absolutely.
Have I got that right?
Yes, that was Lizzo.
I'm so excited to welcome Eric to close out day one of Innovate Finance. Eric is actually incredible. I was going to say bloody incredible then, but I didn't know whether I was allowed to say that. So as Katie said, Eric is not only an entrepreneur, he's an investor, but he's also one of the executives on the Channel 4 business show, The Moneymaker, which is quite incredible. So I'm delighted to welcome Eric to close out day one of Innovate Finance. And we're going to be talking about all things around investment, diversity actually. So one of the things Eric is absolutely passionate about is underrepresented groups, as Katie said. But let me kick off with challenges for investment in the UK. So at the start of today, Eric, we listened to Janine's incredible speech around investment is still coming into the UK. There are challenges, though, with that. We're seeing challenges in the early stage. We're also seeing challenges in the third stage, and people, as you and I were talking about, going outside of the UK. Give me your perspective on that environment right now.
Thank you for having me.
Small question.
It is a tiny little question, I'm sure.
And how do we solve it, Eric, by 6?
I'm going to make sure that I think of Lizzo while doing this. So, and thank you for having me. What I would say is it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. Maybe I should say it's the worst of times and the best of times. A person who's my age has been through a number of cycles, right? So I would have gone through the crisis in 2008, 2009, 2010. I would have gone through the dot-com crash, all of during times when I was actually in companies and fast growth companies in both of those situations. This is no different in some ways, but then it's so unique. When I think about the public markets, and the public markets are really what drive a lot of the behavior because of the liquidity issues that are experienced by the people who I work with. So I'm constantly out fundraising, just like any entrepreneur. I'm constantly fundraising. And when I go talk to endowments, I go talk to foundations, the liquidity issues that they're having are creating real challenges to their base mandates. Yeah. And so where we maybe would have gotten a commitment from them a year ago and we were still fundraising, suddenly they don't have the liquidity to actually be able to follow through.
It shifts so quickly, doesn't it?
Very quickly. And when I think then also about at least me and my team, we have got the experiences of having done this before. We have a series of relationships that are relatively deep. We have a track record that can be drawn upon. If you're a fast growth technology company, you're a first time entrepreneur, you are a woman or a person of color in particular, you keep on going from, well, there are all sorts of possibilities in the world, and then there are very few limited possibilities. So that's one of the things that I'm actually noting. We just don't have a lot of bench strength among young people and a lot of experience that is helping them to manage this particular situation. And here in the UK, we don't have as much bench strength in that as we say do in the United States, where I was in most of these other sort of situations. I was in the United States and there with the venture capital market, and at that time Silicon Valley Bank and other sorts of organizations. There was a bit more bench strength and sort of general ecosystem knowledge. Yeah.
It's interesting because we keep talking about, I mean, I remember being here actually this time last year and we talked about unprecedented events. And it's part of life now. And that dealing with complexity, dealing with constant change and dealing with move. There's also a lot of optimism. I mean, I was chatting to Chris Woolard earlier about, whilst there's lots of challenge, there's also lots of opportunity. I'd love to get your perspective on, despite the headwinds, what do you see are the opportunities that we currently have? And how do we, I mean, if you're a founder, which some of the guys are in the audience, how do you navigate some of that, and how do you start to hunt out those opportunities?
Well, so as a person who has been running companies here in the UK, I was part of the C-suite of a company called SwiftKey. There was an AI company that sold to Microsoft. I was then COO of another company. There was a health tech company called Touch Surgery, and sold to Medtronic, another public company in the US. What we have noted...
Do you love how he just rattles off a CV like we'd all die for?
That was good. It's supposed I'm very modest, as you can tell.
I did the first internet bank.
I think that the thing that for both of those organizations is they were in segments that have, for the UK, are places where there is an interest and there's a perception that Europe and the UK can actually lead. There are places like in social media where it is not considered a space where the UK actually leads, and that Europe is actually behind other sort of territories, China and the US, in terms of those types of things. But when I look at some of the fundamentals of the marketplace, the fundamentals are that this is not an overly excited and overhyped space region generally. So that indeed the hype culture, which has helped to drive valuations and helped to drive exit interest and momentum, sometimes to an extreme point, and then we see some plummeting of that, doesn't necessarily exist here. So some of the fundamentals around how we invest in the UK, it actually reminds me a little bit more of how people invest in the US on the East Coast as opposed to the West Coast.
Okay.
So business models that feel a bit more durable, an early creation of things like a revenue generation engine, and sort of the unit economics can actually be driven. And then if we're thinking about specific sectors, then when we're looking at health tech and we're also looking at FinTech, obviously gold standards exist and are seen that way around the world here in the UK. So by having those sorts of organizations, and a lot of those, and sort of we over-index in terms of them, it makes it a good, those two dynamics actually make it a good time to invest, that the business models are a bit more sort of resistant to
some of the movement.
And then also that you're looking at sectors that make sense. But then the last thing that I would add is, but still here in the UK, we do have an under-indexing in terms of investing in women and people of color. If you look at a big inefficiency, that the place that you're always looking for as an investor is you're looking for differentiated deal flow. Here in the UK, it is herd mentality. Everyone is flowing to the same deals. Women and people of color are in the same sort of spaces and doing some of the same sorts of innovation in FinTech and health tech, but people are still following. If there's a white man who came out of Cambridge or Oxford, that's what we're looking for as a signal that these are going to be organizations that are going to be interesting money makers going forward. And in my opinion, that is something which continues to hamper the ability for the UK to deliver all that it can. And I've been on the board of Tech Nation now for a number of years, and I find that to be consistent as we look across all of our cohorts and all of our different programs. There's an undervaluing of the opportunity that exists with differentiated deal flow.
Yeah, I just listening to Eric talk, I mean, it reminded me of how we started today, because this is exactly what Janine and Chris Hayward were talking about. Whilst we see headline numbers, and Janine's in the audience, around, you know, we're still seeing investment, but actually when you strip that down, that women entrepreneurs, women of colour entrepreneurs, we've got another board member in the room today, Parveen, who is absolutely passionate about this area, that those opportunities just become smaller and smaller, because you're right, even socioeconomic neurodiversity, you'll follow the crowd in terms of, we're going to talk all day, I can feel it coming. Let me, because I'm conscious there's a clock ticking down as well, but who are the companies that you're looking at the moment from a UK perspective that are driving forward or making progress? Can you share some of the things that excite you?
Let me tell you what excites me. What excites me are organizations that are involved with, and they have criteria in two ways. One is that they are fast growth organizations that are continuing to evolve and to continue to hit metrics and milestones quarter after quarter after quarter. They are in places that make sense. And in fact, one is an organization that I'd hope to bring here, and maybe some of you all know about it since this is an insurance organization, the insurtech company Marshmallow.
Yeah.
The reason that I like a company like Marshmallow is because Marshmallow was started by Black Britons, twins, and a friend. And they built an organization that's been
incredible business model.
But it's an interesting, it's an interesting problem that they're trying to solve. How do you make sure that people who are expats and people who are young people, both of whom are underserved and often overcharged by the insurance industry, how do you get them to get the right kind of insurance at a good premium for auto? And so they do this, and they're able to grow this organization. If you looked at the Financial Times a few months ago, you'll see that they're the second fastest growing company in Europe. I want to repeat that. They're the second fastest growing company in Europe. You'll remember organizations with names like Spotify and Klarna that have also had that kind of a designation. That organization has been able to grow. It still has, at this point, with doubling in size year after year, 50% of their employees are women, 20% are people of color, and these are in key roles. They're not just in some introductory program that's an apprenticeship program. They're actually running divisions. They're running engineering. They're doing all those sorts of things. So that's one organization. And I think that it's an oversight. If you look at their cap table, I'd encourage you to go look at their cap table and see if you see all the names that you'd expect to see. Think of the biggest venture capital firms that are always trying to get return. When we invested $30 million pre-money valuation, 18 months later, $1.2 billion. And none of the names that you'd expect to see having invested in them are actually invested in them. It's been a bunch of women and people of color run venture capital firms that have helped to propel that organization. So we get to enjoy all the benefit. The other organization is in the sustainability space. It was started by, and one of the founding team is a Bangladeshi Brit. And we love he's Bangladeshi Brit, we love that. And then we love the idea that they're also dealing with this issue of the digital divide. How do we get cell phones, which are an absolute necessity, especially when we saw COVID? There are very many families where that's the only device that they're using in terms, and if you're in the UK, if you're black, generally that's the way that you're actually getting online. If you have an old phone, you can't get 5G, you can't do a number of things. And this is an organization that actually helps to make that available through a leasing model. So a FinTech company, actually, a leasing model that happens and you return your phone every 2 years and then we sell the phone into a secondary market. All sorts of fantastic things, growing by leaps and bounds. I hope to be able to one day soon announce that they're a unicorn. But those are the sorts of organizations that we're finding in the UK and Europe, started by people of color, and we believe that we have hit a trick that other people are missing, and that if people continue to and inefficiently look at the market, they will continue to lose opportunities, and ImpactX is happy to be able to hoover all those up for ourselves and our investors.
This guy's incredible. And we have run out of time, which is rubbish, so we're going to get this guy back undoubtedly. He's absolutely incredible. I'm going to ask you one question, Eric, to finish us off. If you could leave one thing for this audience, and we've got the audience here and it will also go out after IFGS, what's the one thing you would leave the audience with? We've got obviously people from government, regulators, we've got people from policy, we've got people from all the bodies that support this industry to actually drive it to do more, do better for customers and talent. So, and I know this is yours, and this is a fantastic session, and I'm going to say this one thing, and hopefully this still gets me invited back. It will. Don't worry. Asset allocators, you have got to do better. You have really got to do better. The idea that you are taking capital, I have insurance, I have a pension, I have a lot of things, and that my money is not going towards some of these spaces where there's inefficiency, and it continues to double down in places where I think I could get a much better return elsewhere. Asset allocators, including the government with the British Business Bank, including other places where they are actually allocating resources, you need to make it part of what you're saying you must do, is that you've got to look beyond your small networks that are associated with the places that you know and the people that you know and the people who look like you and act like you. It has got to be broad, and we are missing so much opportunity here in the UK because of that narrowness. I was just speaking at Oxford at a book festival the other day, and I was like looking at the audience, I said, narrow, let's broaden. Okay, let's broaden. Right. You are welcome back. And interestingly, we've got Taffy Jomo, who's at the front as well, who's one of the big insurance leaders in the US. And she was nodding the entire time you were talking there. So, Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And you are absolutely invited back. So, Eric, thank you. It was great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've got the privilege of closing today. I know there's only a few of us, but I'm going to say one thing. I can't tell you how proud I am of this team at this point in time. And if you were here for Janine's speech today, she was utterly incredible. If you could take that passion and drive it into everything we do, it was quite phenomenal, actually. The one thing I've got, and I will close out the conference tomorrow, but I want to leave it for today because I think it's important that we talk about it for the next 24 hours. Everybody here who represents a FinTech, a heritage organisation, a group, a trades body, anything, government, regulators, tech sec, whatever, we are brilliant individually, but we are phenomenal when we work together. So my ask is, how do we continue to drive that strength collectively together? Because if we don't, we will lose the high growths. We will lose the opportunity that we have, and we won't deliver on some of that message that Eric talked about around engaging underrepresented groups. So my entire message for the rest of this conference is, how do we continue that collective strength? And we have to continue to do that, otherwise we will fall behind. I'm so delighted Ez joined us today, and if you didn't see the fireside chat with Janine and Ez, where we started to talk about the new coalitions, which is open banking, which is obviously in Helen's world as well, and how we really support those teams and get behind stuff. And it actually, and forgive me, Ez, it almost doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter what some of these themes are. And I know that's probably not what you want. We've just got to get behind some of this stuff together. So I am so proud of you, Janine. You were brilliant today. Peter, Roberto, the entire team, Thin, you're all here. So thank you for today. There are drinks in the exhibitor hall, and I'll see you tomorrow. But thank you very much for staying over.